On January 15, 1974, Dennis Rader strangled 4 members of the Otero family in their family home in Wichita, Kansas. Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK killer, between the years of 1974 and 1991, Rader murdered 10 people. In 2005, he was finally caught and put to jail. The signs of a serial killer can be many things. In this case, murdering animals was Rader's sign. In this essay, I will be talking about the life of Dennis Rader, his murders, his involvement with local authorities, and how he was caught. Dennis Rader was born on March 9, 1945, in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and spent his life growing up in Wichita. Rader is the oldest of 4 children and seemed to have a normal childhood. This is until he started showing signs of odd and disturbing behavior and began hanging stray animals and developing a sexual fantasy involving bondage. In the mid-1960s, Rader dropped out of college and enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. Once returning back to his hometown of Wichita in 1971, he married his wife Paula and had 2 children. In 1974, he became an employee of the ADT security company and was also a committed regular to his local church. Those who knew him in the church knew him for his welcoming attitude towards newcomers, and he eventually was named president of the church congregation. His first murders took place in January of 1974. He broke into the Otero family home and strangled 4 of the 5 family members who lived there. Their oldest son came home later that day and found their bodies. Semen was also left at the crime scene and was later proved that Rader was a sexual sadist and found sexual pleasure in his actions during his murders. A few months later in April, Rader waited in the home of Caitlin Bright. He stabbed and strangled her before her brother Kevin came home and found Rader in the apartment. Rader shot her brother twice and he luckily survived. Kevin told authorities that Rader was an average-sized guy, bushy mustache, psychotic eyes. In October of 1974, the BTK killer went public. Rader placed a letter in the local library, which eventually ended up in the hands of local authorities. The letter stated, "It's hard to control myself. You probably call me psychotic with sexual perversion hang-up. The code words for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK." Those initials stuck, and Dennis Rader became known as the BTK killer. BTK's next known murders were in 1977. In March, Rader broke into the home of Shirley Vian. After locking her kids in the bathroom of their home, Rader tied up Vian and strangled her to death. In December, Rader strangled Nancy Fox in her home. Once she was dead, Rader called the police about the murder before fleeing the scene. A few weeks later, Rader sent in a poem about the Vian murder, and a few weeks after that he sent in a letter to a local news station about the murders of Vian, Fox, and another unknown victim. After several years of the BTK being radio silent, in April of 1985, Rader killed his neighbor, Maureen Hedge. Her body was found on the side of the road several days later. The following year, he killed Vicki Wegler in her home. BTK's final known victim was Dolores Davis in January of 1991. She was taken from her home and was never seen or heard from her again. In 2004, BTK resurfaced again. Rader sent local authorities and media outlets multiple letters and packages filled with items related to his murder. He included pictures, a word puzzle, and a computer disk. The computer disk luckily sent authorities to Rader's local church. Local investigators obtained a DNA sample from Rader's daughters and ultimately came up with a match for the packages delivered. In 2005, Rader was arrested and charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. In June of 2005, Rader pleaded guilty to all charges. In court, as part of his plea, Rader gave in full detail of all the murders committed and showed no signs of remorse while explaining. Rader now serves 10 life sentences in the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas. In conclusions, the signs of a serial killer can be many things. For BTK, his signs were killing animals as a child and gaining sexual pleasure from violence. Dennis Ryder is one of the most notorious serial killers known to date, and his signs were not as certain as other serial killers. Dennis Ryder was a known favorite of the church, and yet he was still able to commit these horrific acts of violence. The point I'm trying to make for this speech is that anyone can become a serial killer, so watch out for signs, even if it's the smallest sign. Here's a picture of Dennis Ryder. Here's a picture of Dennis Ryder whenever he was younger. And here's a picture of Dennis Ryder and one of his daughters.